Teachers, thank you for what you do every day. I think it's one of the hardest callings in the church to teach early morning seminary. And just the simple fact that you're preparing multiple lessons every week with the limited amount of time that you have, I just want to say thank you. I had an experience preparing for today's lesson, Jim, where I read through the teacher's manual and I really liked a lot of the things in there, but it just wasn't clicking. And I'm embarrassed to say how many hours I spent trying to get this to come together. And my heart just went out to you, as many of you have those experiences. And yet, eventually the time comes where you have to teach. And sometimes it's come together and sometimes it hasn't. And so just thanks for what you do. Teaching seminary is not for the faint of heart. And it takes a lot of faith to do what you do day in and day out. And so just a heartfelt thanks. As I mentioned, I did like what's in the teacher's manual here, but sometimes it doesn't click and you're like, I like the objective, our target here, but maybe it's the introduction to the lesson that you're struggling with. So let me just give you an example. I actually like this as I came back to this and looked at it again. I think this would be a good way to start class, but maybe I'm going, I don't know, it's just not clicking with me. I want to promote unity and valuing others, but how do I do it? So I know this is going to sound crazy, but one of the ways that I'll do it is I'll come into ChatGPT. And here's an example. I just typed in, what's an example of something we can only do with the help of others? And it gave an example, and I said, can you think of other examples that would involve high school students? And it gave some great examples right here, and I thought, okay, I'm going to focus on the high school musical. So I typed in and said, how many people does it take to produce a school musical? And this is what it came up with right here. And so I copied this and put it straight in the PowerPoint. And so this is what I ended up with. I would have the class get into small teams, let them know that they're going to have 1 minute. Then I would tell them that whoever has been in a musical, that they're going to be the scribe for their team. Or if nobody's been in a musical, then the tallest person in the group will be the scribe. They're going to have 1 minute to brainstorm all the different people it takes to pull off a school musical, from the stars on the stage to the heroes behind the scenes. Ready, set, go. Like a previous lesson we did, you'll have a 1 minute timer there with some music that'll start when you start the timer. I keep you close to me, like the... At the end of the minute, have them share with you how many they came up with. You can show them this list after they've shared some and see if there were some they didn't think of, or some maybe they thought of that aren't on this list. And then ask the question, which person is the most important? You can have a great conversation about, well, even the lead actor, if the sound equipment isn't working, if you don't have a director, the actors aren't going to be able to pull off a play. And I hope what they see eventually is that every person is very important. And although some may seem more important, everybody needs to play their part. I may even be tempted to take them into 1 Corinthians 12, where Paul points out that all the parts of the body are important. And then you could jump into a little context of section 38 and dive into this idea that these saints are getting ready to go to Ohio. They were going to need to be unified. They were going to need to work together. And then you could look at the verses. That's just an idea of how I use ChatGPT from time to time. Most of the times I just have ideas come to my mind and I run with those. But yesterday I just tried typing that in. If I was just stuck and needed an idea perhaps on how to start the lesson and what was in the teacher's manual wasn't clicking with me. Okay, on a completely different note, I want to just throw out something that I noticed with this past general conference that applies to us as teachers. In this past general conference, I noticed that the prophets amplify the words of the prophet more than I've ever seen before. As a matter of fact, I started keeping track of every time somebody quoted President Nelson, because they were truly amplifying his words. So what is an amplifier, and what does it do? Here's a little definition of what an amplifier is, and you've seen these before. It takes a signal and it increases it or strengthens it in some ways so that it can be heard better. Sometimes it's a small signal and it makes it stronger. This past General Conference, we had 32 speakers in General Conference. 22 of them quoted President Nelson directly. And there were several others of the remaining 10 who referenced things he's taught, like Elder Kieran. So prophets and leaders of the church are amplifying President Nelson's word. 38 times in General Conference, President Nelson was quoted. That's amazing. So my question and my invitation is, how can we as teachers amplify the words of our living prophet, President Nelson? And if we are listening to President Nelson's talks regularly as we're planning our lessons, I really believe that we'll feel impressions to include some of his talks in our lesson plans. So, for example, in section 38 here, it talks about practicing virtue and holiness before me in one of the verses there. So I'm going to go to this talk that President Nelson just gave where he focused on virtue and letting virtue garnish our thoughts unceasingly. I have all of these talks from last General Conference ready for you. You can find all of them here in my Google Drive. When you go into each General Conference talk, I took each one and put it right here so you can quickly open it, save it, and then print it off to be able to use in class. I love that the paragraphs are numbered, which makes it so nice for a classroom setting so that you can assign certain paragraphs and that students can reference paragraphs when they want to make a comment. So I might do something like this if I was teaching section 38 and we're talking about practicing virtue and holiness. I would have them get into groups of 2 and let them know that the oldest student would read about charity and the youngest student would read about virtue. The 2 things that President Nelson said we would need to have confidence in God. Then I would let them know we're going to read paragraphs 7 through 10 together as a class, and then afterwards you're going to read your assigned verses. So the class will read 7 through 10. Whoever's assigned charity, you'll do paragraphs 11 through 15, and virtue, you'll do paragraphs 16 through 18, and then you're going to share with each other. So read those verses together out of the talk, or paragraphs together. I call them verses because they are scripture. And then have them go ahead and do that individually, and then come back and share. You may invite a few of them to share together with the class, and then as a class, read verse 19. So you don't have to cover the whole talk every time. What a great way to amplify the words of President Nelson's latest message, what's on his heart and mind. So I just leave you that invitation to look for opportunities to amplify the words of living prophets. One of the ways you can do that is not only this talk that I referenced, but also one of the quotes from the teacher's manual that is outstanding. So the quotes here on the right, I've clipped the video for you so it's the exact length. It'll go full screen while it plays, and then it'll come back down, and then you could ask these 3 questions right here following the video. One more way we can amplify the words of the prophets. I want to point this out right here, that there are 2 other videos in here that are outstanding. They're only a minute each, but please make time in your lessons to show these 2. The one's called Be One, the other one's called We Don't Need to Be the Same to Be One, and they're wonderful. Sometimes, and most of the time, the teacher's manual just has really good videos, more than you'll ever get to. But if someday you're reading that, going through the teacher's manual and think it's just not clicking, can I just show you one other source that I go to occasionally? This is called passiton.com. That's the name of the website. When you come into it, you have wonderful quotes and videos that they've made available that are just inspirational. It's non-denominational. And they're very careful not to ever be political. But for example, we're focusing on section 38 and being unified, being united. So I put in the search unity. It pulls up some great quotes right here. You could pick one and just easily put it into a PowerPoint. Here's this quote from President Lincoln. There's some great articles down here. If you come into the videos right here and scroll down, you'll see all these different videos. 30 seconds to a minute is all the length that they're going to be. And here's the topic each one's going to be about. And if you don't cry within the first couple you watch, I'll be amazed, because I sit and watch these and I just cry. They're so good. And I'm very, very careful about bringing in any outside sources besides what's in the teacher's manual. But I do feel safe doing these, and I actually reached out to this foundation and they said it is fine to use these in the seminary classroom. Now, I know I've just given you a lot of different ideas and some resources here. Go through the teacher's manual. It is really well done. And I just wanted to today mainly just give you some ideas of maybe a different approach on some resources to use that I hope you find helpful. Let me just show you one more. Of course, we always want to be Christ-centered. And if we're going to talk about unity and valuing others, We want to go to the life of the Savior. So I would want to make sure and end with this bold principle here. We can become like Jesus Christ as we value others and seek unity as his disciples. And then these two questions: how is Jesus Christ an example of valuing others? How is he an example of encouraging unity? So I was trying to think in my mind some of the ways that Jesus shows that he values other people, or that he is a unifier. But again, I just came in ChatGPT for a minute. I was short on time, and so I put it in there. Can you give me examples from the life of Jesus Christ that illustrate he valued others? And it just gave this short list, and it was like, oh, that's really good. I hadn't thought of a few of those. If you're short on time, you'll be very grateful for some of these examples. What examples from the life of Jesus show he valued unity? And again, some great examples here. Now, most of the time, you're going to throw out that question. The students are just going to hit it out of the park, right? But sometimes just being able to give them an example or two, and that'll spark their minds, and then they'll start sharing. Again, I use ChatGPT sparingly, but I know a lot of you are really short on time when you're preparing, and I hope in some way that this will bless you. Thanks again for what you do. I would just want to end where I started, and I have in my heart such a love and appreciation for what you do every single day. I hope that these lesson gems can just help in some small way. If it shaves off a little bit more time for you that you can spend with your family, then it's worth it. And I hope that you have a wonderful experience in the classroom with this lesson. Please reach out to me if you have any questions.